Yeah, but then when I looked out the window, yeah, there was nothing there. So, I mean, what
I
can
know
you say?
it's the same reason that I couldn't get that smudge off the side of the awning, and that green stuff just got all over my fingers and stuff. But it tasted like grape.
Like grape? Well, that's not all bad, but bleach will take care of that, you know.
I mean, what's good
Oh,
about this is,
oh, oh, we're
oh wait a
live.
second, we're live.
Welcome, everybody, to the Trampled Underfoot podcast, coming to you from under the smogberry trees.
That's right.
So,
It's Mark over on the west and Eloy on the east. How's everybody doing? Woo!
uh, um, uh, it's raining again. It's typical Oregon winter. And I mean, you know, and this is why I say we don't get a suntan in Oregon. We rust, is because this started in September and there's no sign of it letting up yet. And it's going to be another one of those, another one of those years. We get a lot of rain and then nothing. About the first week of June, we won't get another drop of rain until September, but that's all right. We'll figure it out.
Well, I'm still dealing with, I don't know if it's allergies, but my throat's a little bit sore
Mhm.
and all that stuff. It is allergy season, but at the same time, it's like,
Oh, yeah.
whatever. So it's that. Um,
Yeah, it is allergy season, and invest in Alka Seltzer Plus
mhm.
because I'm here to tell you I'm getting it by the case. I'm
Mhm.
thinking about ordering it and having it trucked in, just get a pallet of it and be done with it. That's one of the few things I can take that won't put me to sleep. See, that's the weird, goofy thing about me is I don't do drugs. I can't do drugs. And the reason I can't do drugs is because I'm the world's biggest lightweight. Most cold medicine will put me straight to sleep. So I tell people I have like a 5 cent a decade habit. Alka Seltzer Plus is about the only thing I can take that does not put me to sleep. And so you know the problem with it is well, number one, tastes nasty, and number two, it's getting expensive. These people got to knock it off. They really got to knock it off.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Jim Dockrell, Harneal Media, Snow Crusher, Linda Harn. Oh, I said Harneal already.
Yeah, Linda says smogberry or snogberry. Smogberry with an M. Snogberry is something very different. Yes.
Snotberry.
Now, snog is British slang for necking. We would call it necking. Getting hot and
Yeah,
heavy. And
yeah. Necking is what it was called, but necking wasn't one of the making out was more like it, but
Mhm.
that was the standard
Yeah.
making out. But necking was a secondary option.
Well, necking and
So
making out are the same thing. It's just a different
alternative.
generation, different terminology.
Yeah,
You know,
we called it making out.
it was kind of 50-50 with us. It's kind of, I mean, you knew what both of them were, but
Yeah.
it's just, you know, I don't know.
Um.
Yeah, Jim says, as a teenager in the 70s, you should be able to handle all the drugs. No, not so at all. Not so at all. I'm the world's biggest lightweight. It just, I can't do that kind of thing. I just can't.
Um. Well, so you have the necking, and then you have the making out, and I'm
Mhm.
sure. And then what was the other one?
Oh, good Lord.
Smog. You said snog.
Oh, snog. Snog is British slang. It's not something real popular here. But, you know,
So off the heels of that,
mm,
one of the many things that I've been looking at, or that I had seen throughout the week and stuff, and this should, I guess, this would be a more tamer thing than what my mind has been thinking about. Because I'll just briefly say, sometimes current events can really get a person uncomfortably riled up. Um, it's like I'm not going to touch the elephant in the room because there's plenty of people talking about that unless it's brought up for some reason or another.
yeah.
Um, Um, Beagle, don't do that. Um, so I ran into a a discussion where they were talking about language,
Mm-hmm.
and I've delved slightly into it in little bits here and there. Um, and this happened to be an old video of a university sit down chat between the university host
Mm-hmm.
and Noam Chomsky,
Okay.
which he's known really as a political sort of like towards the left of the spectrum, but he's actually, and he does a lot of that, but he's actually a linguistics guy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like his profession, although
Right.
he's branched out into all this kind of stuff. And so putting that secondary thing to the side, on the linguistics, they were talking about the English language, or
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they were talking about the English language, but language in general.
Right.
And we've touched on this subject, but he said, and this applies for all languages, he said that there is no such thing as an English language. There's no such thing as an Italian language. There's just languages. And he unpacked it, and he said a few things that were curious. So I'll lay out the basics and see what you think.
Okay.
So there is a textbook English that's
Mm-hmm.
written down,
Sure.
and then people come to the table across history and study it, and so you have that written thing. But what he was suggesting, and he used other examples from other societies like Italy and stuff,
Right.
other societies. But what happens is, so you and I are using the English language currently right now,
Mm-hmm.
but we're actually little versions of, this is the best way I can sum it up, little versions of the English language. So for instance,
Right.
the only reason we can communicate is because I have my own language, and
Sure.
and much of it falls within the English, and you likewise. But there's no thing called the English in terms of, I have my own language, and although I'm using the technicalities or rules to a certain degree, if you sit and listen, as he was saying, to each individual, they're actually speaking different languages. So when people come together and communicate, it's a situation where it's good enough that each other can understand themselves enough so that ideas keep going back and forth.
Right.
So it kind of suits and kind of works. But in reality, we all are each, we're brought up with such specific little things. So he unpacked all that. And as a final thing, yeah. So that's the basic tenets of what he was explaining. It makes sense. Obviously, if I had to bet, you're understanding everything that I'm saying.
Right.
But if you were to repeat what I'm saying in your way, you would have a whole different set of word structuring.
It's
Even
possible.
though,
Yeah.
right, although there would be significant crossover between you and I, but even the inflections. Last thing, he said he went to Scotland, like, oh, I visited
Mm-hmm.
Scotland, this and that, and it took me a few days. Sure, I know that we're talking
Mm-hmm.
the same language, but it took me a few days to really get, my toes dipped in the water of that, in order to acclimate. But at some point in the beginning, you're listening to people and you're missing whole sections of the
Right.
same supposed language. But the truth of the matter is that they're not necessarily really. They're all independently, organically working from person to person. And so that was all on the heels of, well, the guy said, well, the English language, why do some people talk weird, and then he brought up the African American slang, and he says a lot of people think that is a corruption of English. It has nothing to do with corruption of anything.
No.
That's completely legitimate, like any other. And so he unraveled all these stuff.
It's a
What do you?
dialect. Yes, it's a dialect. And that's something that a lot of people need to understand is the argument about, well, look what they're doing to the English language. Stop right there. There has never been a golden age when anybody spoke perfect English language. And the reason for that is because it's constantly evolving and it's constantly changing. We have words now that we never used in the past, even 20 years ago. We have words now, artificial intelligence. The word artificial was there, the word intelligence was there. But the two together as a phrase, as a common term that everybody understood, did not exist 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Mhm.
So the language is constantly evolving, the language is constantly changing. And it doesn't matter whether it's the spoken word or the written word.
Mhm.
When was the last time you used a semicolon? Very rarely, probably. And a lot of people have gone to the dash. Some people call it a hyphen. A dash and a hyphen look identical, they're different. But anyway, I won't get into that. So there was never a golden age when language was spoken perfectly. So we need to get off of that. I do not see anything as a corruption in one way, manner, or form. I understand his point about there's no such thing as an English language. I don't tend to agree with it because I think what he's doing is he's splitting it up with all of the different dialects. Well, if these are all so different, how could we call it a common language? We call it a common language because no matter what we say, if we write it down, we know exactly what it means. If I write down the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, doesn't matter if it's you or if it's somebody in Ireland, Wales, Scotland, any other English speaking nation, they know what that means without a doubt if they're fluent in English.
Well, to be fair, remember I mentioned that he
Yeah.
explained, because this was key, that
Mhm.
there's such a thing as what's written down, like this textbook
Right.
information. But if you analyze people, um,
Yeah.
he's basically saying that in practice, it's a spectrum that
Yes.
evolves even from region to region. But even
Mhm.
within regions, you'll have people that take up certain go-to um, portions. And if you take someone from New York and place them somewhere in, who knows, Australia or whatnot, there's going to be issues with certain structures, with certain usages,
Yes.
because it evolves differently from place to place as far as usage. So there is a written thing, but then there's that.
And that's where I was going with this because breaking it down by regional dialect or even accent or idioms or colloquialisms or phrases. I mean, quick, do you call it pop, soda, Coke? I mean, they're all the same thing, but each region or sub-region within that region will have a different name for it. Is it a drinking fountain or is it a bubbler? Is it a milkshake or a frappe? They're all the same things. So I get what he's saying. But then you also have colloquialisms. Like if you listen to somebody in Scotland, they have phrases over there that we never use, that we have no idea what the hell it means.
Mhm.
Hod your wicht means shut your mouth. It's English, but we don't use that phrase. So we don't know what the hell are you talking about. So I do get his point on that. But it's okay. Okay. Al over there said, no, it's a water fountain. Is it a water fountain or a drinking fountain? You know, it's whatever you want. Because if you tell me a water fountain, I can probably figure out that you mean a drinking fountain. I don't think you want me to go down to the middle of the town square and drink out of that fountain. But yeah, we can kind of piece it together.
Yeah.
I get his point, and it's an interesting concept. uh, But I will depart from his assertion that there's no such thing as the English language or the Italian language or the Spanish language. I don't know that I would come to that conclusion, but I can understand why he would say that.
Yeah, no, his the key here
Hmm.
is the difference between a something put together, written
Hmm.
in a dictionary and so on and so forth, and
Hmm.
then the usage. So he's trying to express
Yeah.
when the person from the university was saying, well, the rules of the English language and so on and so forth, and he, as a linguistics guy, um, tried to
Pulled him up on that.
accentuate. Well, he tried to accentuate the concept,
Hmm.
which is basically the one that you were suggesting that we have to get over and so on. So
Yeah.
you're basically on the same page as
Yeah.
he. I'm not obviously
Well.
giving you the perfect thing that he said.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm giving you sort of like a recap, roughly the things that
Hmm.
I. But you're basically saying the same thing.
Right.
Um, when the spoken word alters in societies that are in different
Well.
places, it basically becomes a continuum that from one end to the other could sound completely like
Mhm.
two different languages.
Well, and not only that, but our own selves. We don't even have to go to somewhere else and hear other people speak. We do it ourselves individually. You would talk to your mother and father in a completely different way than you talk to your friends.
Mhm.
And you will talk to me in a completely different way than you would talk to a judge or a bank, somebody at the bank you're trying to get a loan from. We have our own languages
Mhm.
within ourselves that we'll use. I mean, you've never been married, but if you talk to your mother-in-law, there are certain words, situations, and topics you just totally avoid. You'll never speak about any of those things to your wife's parents at all. Certain things are taboo. But with your wife, there are certain things you wouldn't talk about certain people, or with your friends there are certain topics that are taboo, and with other, you know a judge or something like that, a lot is taboo. You become more formal, you tend to change your posture a little bit, so we do that, just in ourselves, depending upon the person and the situation. So I totally get his point, but I don't know that I'm ready to go as far as he went. But then again, if he's a linguist and has been studying this his entire life, I'm just some mope who kind
Yeah.
of is a word nerd for a hobby.
But I don't see why you would, because he basically the two basic things that you are saying that you
Hmm.
believe is basically what he
Right.
expressed.
But
I don't
I
know. I
wouldn't,
don't see where the your
because I see
party.
it because I see it all as part of the English language and part of the
Oh,
fun of the English language, of whereas his assertion was there really isn't an English language.
oh,
I
okay.
I would agree if he meant I don't think there's a formal written in stone this is English language. I don't think that exists anymore. There may have
But
been at one time.
you're still, but I'm curious. You're still saying the same damn thing he's saying,
Right.
because you're saying the exact same damn thing, except um that I think that there's a piece missing here, which is that the broad category that you're focusing on, you're sticking with the broad. You're saying, well, it falls under this umbrella,
Yeah,
but
it's all
his
part of the English language. Yeah.
right, but
Mhm.
he, in order to explain the details of why that's not true under a microscope,
Mhm.
which you also expressed that you agree. Like, I'm trying to
I,
clean this one up for.
I
No,
agreed
no,
to the
let me
point.
finish. Let me finish what I'm saying, so you understand. Or, see, here's where the thing is. I'm trying to express something in the English language as far as I understand it, and to me, the concept is completely clear. But you're having a difficulty understanding why I see that as no problem.
I'm not having a difficulty. I'm trying to prevent you from going down a road that may be misguided.
Okay, go ahead and
That
explain it. Go ahead and explain it.
what I'm saying is, uh, you kind of said it earlier, talk about me maybe thinking the glass is half full versus half empty. He's saying that because of all these differences, and let me make sure that I've got this right, okay? So tell me if I've got this right. He's saying that because of all these linguistic differences, be it regional accent or whatever, that there's really no English language because it's so
No,
completely different. That's not what he meant.
no.
Okay,
Let me make it
try
as
that.
clear as I
Okay,
can.
so maybe
Speaking
I
the
was
English.
wrong then.
Well, it's it's not a finite wrong. It's
Hmm.
I'm notice what's happening. I'm expressing within the English language,
Hmm.
and you're receiving English words, but the concepts. If I were to set up the
But it's
right set of words, well, no, let me
yeah.
explain my point. If I were to if I had the capacity to set up the right set of words in order that form
Hmm.
struck sentences that arrive at you in the way that you would perfectly receive it, because the trick here is that although I'm talking to you in English, the way I'm trying to get ideas across are mine.
Right.
um, and if I were to if I had a seat in your head to be able to map the road out so that what I'm trying to express landed exactly with the definitions that you
I'm
use within that, then we wouldn't need never to talk with each other because we'd already know each
and
other.
then it's and then it's still got to bounce around in my head and I have to process what you said. And if I misconstrue something or misunderstand something, my response is going to be
Okay,
totally inappropriate. So that's
okay,
what I'm saying.
okay. Check this out. In your head or my head or anybody's head, there is a sentence, and I'm
Hmm.
being broad, but we can home it in. There is a sentence. No, be open to the
Yeah, I'm
suggestion. And
yeah, I dude,
this is actually within the situation of communication and language. If go ahead.
you
If
went off to this you went off to the side again.
okay,
Go ahead.
so listen. There is a sentence in the
Hmm.
English language
Hmm.
that would get you to something. I'm using this as an example. Mark buys a candy bar. I know
Hmm.
that's a simple thing, but
Sure.
imagine a more complicated sentence. There's a sentence or a structure, and there could be various. To be fair,
Hmm.
that sentence, it could be anything. It could be because in 1835 the economic stability, you could use. But let's say just a simple thing. Mark went and got a candy bar, as an example of every other possible sentence out there, complicated or simple. There's a way that that's structured for you that
Yeah.
you can receive it and agree to it every time.
Yep.
You're making a joke out of it. Um,
Well,
the
because it was a true statement.
it's such an important it's such an important concept because
Hmm.
it's in. Here's another problem. I'm trying to express something that is very much true,
And I
but
was
you would
showing
not.
you that it was true.
Yeah, we can't cross that Rubicon. Um,
Okay.
but see, we can't cross that Rubicon. It's unfortunate because that's exactly the point of the linguistic situation. Um, if somebody had a seat in your head,
Hmm.
forget that bouncing around thing that you were talking about. If
Hmm.
somebody was you, in that
Hmm.
the choices that you make every time to speak because of your upbringing and all the things, if somebody was sitting there co-piloting in your head, or themselves, whatever, there would be no need for any type of conversation because everything would be its resolution, because the language would be perfectly falling in place word by word, so that
I'm,
any concept would need no discussion. So, like, let's say, we talk about the president, or we talk about weather, or we talk about this and that. The reason that there's wiggle room in every back and forth within the English language or any language is because we structure things in certain ways that nudge to one side or the other between people. So what I'm trying to get at is um, that on that basis, Chomsky was telling the guy, which had suggested to him that there's this solid thing called the English language, and Chomsky was, as far as my understanding of what I was listening to,
hmm.
because there's the
Right. And that's why I'm wondering, because I'm getting this secondhand, but go ahead.
and so there's that.
Hmm.
By implication, by me suggesting what I'm suggesting,
Hmm.
there's that scenario. Nobody is free of it.
Hmm.
So I'm including
Right.
myself in that. I'm not
Right.
saying Mark is an isolated thing. I'm saying that we're all in
Hmm.
this, in this. So he was trying to explain to the guy that there's no upper crust. In reality, there is a written thing,
Mm-hmm.
but even like, let's say, like the ebonics and such and this and that, like all
Mm-hmm.
these things, we may look upon them as favorable or not as favorable
Mm-hmm.
due to, you know,
Our
cultural,
biases and what have you. Yeah.
right. But as far as it being legitimate, if, and we've agreed on this many
Yeah.
times, if the basic thing is that they communicated and they got like
Yeah.
the thing done, then language served its function.
Okay. Then
But
and in that I agree 100% because I see it just as legitimate as anything somebody in the South would say, in the Northeast would say, or out here on the West Coast would say. It does.
right,
I don't care who you are, what your background is. I don't care what your ancestry is. It's all a part of the same language. So if he was saying, as I was saying, that there is no, golden tower where this is English,
Mhm.
and unless you stick to this, you're not speaking English. If he's saying that doesn't exist, I agree. I
yeah,
agree
yeah,
100%.
that's basically no,
Okay.
but not to complicate it. But yes, that's exactly. But not to complicate it. He did mention, there are people that sit down and say this is the way it should be written, and they prepare it and whatnot, and they come to a consensus within a little group, and that
Yes.
sets a standard and this and that. But
Yes.
for all practical purposes, once you put that book out there, like any other thing, like you could do that with music. Like let's say you have like Segovia, he writes this a book on music theory.
Mm-hmm.
Once he puts that out into the world,
Mm-hmm.
the world takes it and let someone living in Bangkok gets the book. Someone like there's no reality in which um, a language is unbiasedly followed without any
Right.
alterations or this or that.
Right. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I
So
agree with that 100%. But there are certain rules because we have to be able to communicate. Now,
yeah,
I can use a string of words in English that make absolutely no sense, but I've not communicated anything to you. If I say dustpan coffee cup, that makes no sense. It doesn't convey an idea. You don't know what the hell I'm talking about, and you'll be convinced that I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And you'd probably be right. So there are certain rules that we have to follow, be they written or unwritten, in order to not only me transmit the message, but for you to be able to understand that message, receive it, process it, and react however you're going to react to it.
yeah.
So,
So
and that's both in the written word and the spoken word.
okay. So dustpan. What it was
I said,
dustpan. What?
I got to think, dustpan coffee cup. I think you said.
So
I think I said.
dustpan coffee cup. When you said that, the only thing or the main thing that took my brain, because you said something,
Mm-hmm.
even if you explained out after what you said and I understood your point, I believe I see. That's why it's also important. I have a point to say about dustpan coffee cup, but even though you explained to me what you meant,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no reality in
Mm-hmm.
which what you explained to me, there may be one, but there's no reality in what you explained to me coming from your mind,
Mm-hmm.
your decision to make those words put together and send them off to me and the audience at large. There's no
Mm-hmm.
reality to me. There might be some options where you're not preparing a nice bow tied package for me to receive in earnest with sincerity so that your idea can properly be sat in front of me so that I can now consume it and understand your concept.
That's my point.
Unless, right, unless you're trying to be fraudulent, like you or anybody,
Yeah.
unless fraudulent, but even fraudulent
Mm-hmm.
or someone on about, the process of trying to defraud or trying
Mm-hmm.
to be tricksy, or let's say, which also happens in language and stuff because there's also a mental.
Sure.
But even when a person is doing that, they're still delivering a package of information to the receiving end that
Mhm.
they have to unbow tie and unpack, and then all that together they
Mhm.
then consume, and then they have to make judgment calls and whatnot. So the fraud angle
Mhm.
is where people get into trouble as well, because if
Well,
people are, are,
sure.
are sincere and take each other as sincere at
Well,
every step of the way, then at so here's the problem. I'll just say this last part. Let's say there's two people being sincere, as we are right now. We're exchanging ideas,
sure.
but or I believe that to be true, according to our history and everything. But if I choose words, or I'm sorry, I'll say it in reverse to make it a little bit more towards me. If you choose words that I have different sensitivities or
Mhm.
definitions,
Mhm.
or if they align in a certain way,
Right.
even though you are being sincere, uh, truthful, straight shooter, and I receive a few words in the wrong order, I may now
Or take
create
something out of context. Yes.
have a situation out of context, at which point I could veer off from our stream back and forth. And now I have a problem over here. Well, wait a second. What's going on here? When you were delivering a very clear message to me. Well, that happens all the time. So language is actually incredibly complicated.
Well, it is. And that's why I think that we all, every one of us, have to back up, regroup, and just chill out. Simply because I can only I can only react to what you say to me based on my interpretation of it.
Mhm.
I'm not in your head. I'm not in your heart. I can only hope that you're being honest and sincere with me. But you're right. Certain things can make me just roll my eyes or react with anger or something like that,
Mhm.
even though that was never your intent. And
Right.
I think that that is what we should be paying more attention to, is less about what a person says and more about what they do and the total meaning of the statement. Because, for instance, when I said dustpan coffee cup, okay, it's a bunch of nouns strung together. There were no verbs in there, no adverbs, none of that stuff, just nouns. It doesn't make sense on its own. If it was an album title, it would make perfect sense.
Mhm. That's where I was going to go.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Or if it was
See,
the name of a band, then
yeah.
it makes sense.
Well,
But
because
just
the
the
concept.
words, the context is 100% of those words put together.
And that's cultural too, because if you have
Mhm.
coffee cup, whatnot, dustpan, on the title of an album, we already have prior knowledge due to experience that that's the title, and we also know that that sentence allows for wiggle room for us to say, oh,
Right.
it's kind of poetic or artistic or whatnot, and this and that. So in that context, we could imagine whatever we want.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not it's not like a court hearing or some sort of a thing that you need to be rigid and whatnot.
We could even go further and get metaphoric with it. We could even go further in another direction and get all kinds of philosophical about it. We can attach meanings to it that the person who wrote it never even thought of. It just may have been the last two things the guy saw before he sat down to write the music.
Mhm.
We have no idea what was in the artist's head when those four words, well, are they compound words? I don't know. I think dustpan is one word, but coffee cup, I think, is two words. So those three words together, we
So
have no idea if there's any meaning to it at all.
so on the heels of that,
Hmm.
let- we can consider it or not as part
Sure.
two of this idea, but this is a
Okay.
different little angle within this that we're discussing. For the sake of just seeing where things go.
Hmm.
Um, And this is a strange one. You guys have probably run into it. I don't know. So there's a video. It's like a philosophy type deal channel, and the gentleman proposed a sentence, and he created a paradigm. He didn't create it; it's been around, but here's the paradigm. And I'm remembering it as we talk, as it matches with this. The paradigm is, he wrote on a blackboard, "This sentence is not true." Have you heard that one before?
Not that particular one, but I know the vein. I know the concept of where you're heading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this sentence is not true. And he says, this is a very problematic sentence because by reading the sentence, this sentence is not true. If the sentence is not true, and you're reading this, that it says the sentence is not true, then that means that the sentence is true. But if the sentence is true, then it's false, because the sentence is saying that the sentence is not true, which is a lie. And so he creates, if you sit with that concept and read up on it, it creates a paradigm that doesn't work in this world. It cannot be both true and there's nothing, according to the explanation. And when I watched the video about this scenario, this sentence is not true. And then he says, well, if that sentence is not true, and they're saying it's not true, they're making a truthful statement, at which point this sentence is not true is actually true. And therefore, at the same time, it's false. It can't be false. And so he goes into detail as to why that cannot be and how it applies to everything else. On earth, you can't be healthy and yet sick. You can't be lying and yet telling the truth.
The truthful liar. Yes.
Right. So there's a lot of problems with that. And I sat and watched it, and I read the comments of people saying this, and that. Before I say what my solution was, what are you guys'? What's your thoughts and whatnot?
My thoughts is it's one of those. It's one of those mental gymnastics puzzles that can make you go nuts in a swirl cage of thoughts, because you're 100% correct. It's both true and false at the same time.
And it can't be.
Well, yes, you're right. It can't be, but it is. Because if it's true, it can't be false. And if it's false, it can't be true.
Can't be true. Right. Like you can't, and yet...
And there's no such thing as a definite maybe.
And yet it exists.
Right. But that just goes to show that you can put words together in a language that you and I both understand that make no sense. Because it can't be.
And yet it is.
Well, the sentence is there. We can both read it. You've told me. I heard it. It's in my brain. It's bouncing around and trying to process. You know, the little spinning turbine wheel thing when the YouTube is buffering. That's in my head right now. So it is, but it isn't.
It's a very weird thing.
Yes. It's kind of like trying to divide by zero. Don't do that. We'll go into a time warp, you know.
I had more time to think about it. I'm laying it on you just cold like this right now. Do I tell you what my solution? I'm not saying that my solution.
There may not be a solution to it, but go for it.
Right. I was going to say, and my solution might, because once I found my personal thinking on the subject, when I watched the video, I read some of the comments and I saw people saying all these sorts of things, many creative ways around it. But I came to my own conclusion. I'm not saying it's the right conclusion, but I'm saying this is how I thought of it. Okay. I don't know that it solves it, but here's my conclusion.
Okay.
And I wrote it. I wrote it in the thing. I wrote what I thought my conclusion was, because it was stimulating to think and see. So my conclusion was that let me see, what was my conclusion? My conclusion. I'm trying explaining it so much now. I'm like, okay. So my conclusion was, in a nutshell, if okay, this is how I said it. When you go to court in front of a judge that has two parties in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote this roughly, I'm paraphrasing. Those two parties have opposing facts of which they want the judge or the jury or whatever to arrive at what is the truth of the matter
Mm-hmm.
in order to what's the word, adjudicate the scenario, the situation. So you have
Right.
two parties with information that sort of suits the one side or the other, and the judge is acquiring information from both through
Mm-hmm.
their lawyers in order to arrive
Right.
at best you can argue, see, I don't want to sway from the
A
main subject.
decision.
At best you can arrive at a decision based on the best available
The
information
preponderance of the evidence. Yeah.
that leans in one direction or the other. Just like the judge, us reading the sentence, this sentence is not true. This was my solution. We need more information.
Mm-hmm.
Because this sentence is not true, cannot be true, and it cannot be false.
Mm-hmm.
But we live in a world that's not limited to a snippet. There's
Right.
a sentence prior and a certain sentence in front.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of like your statement of dustpan, coffee cup, I don't know what.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a limited thing.
Right. It needs more context.
Right. So that was my solution added. I'm sure there's a way around it. And I'm
Well,
having a reply back.
and context is everything, because what if the sentence before that was Eloy has blonde hair? Eloy has blonde hair. This sentence is not true. Now it makes sense. That ends the paradox.
That's right.
Or this sentence is not true. Eloy has blonde hair. It just ends it. That ends the controversy. So
because we have a full book of information.
We have the full context. We've got a brilliant crowd here tonight. Al, he went into Chat GPT, the AI, and he typed in, "This sentence is not true," and it came back with, "I cannot make a sentence that says it is not true and is not a sentence."
I cannot make a sentence that says that it is not true and it is not a sentence. I can't process that. The statement. Go ahead, you read it.
The statement, "This sentence is not true," creates a paradox, because if the sentence is true, then it must be false. But if it's false, then it must be true.
That's great, Al. We appreciate that a lot, because it really,
therefore, it cannot be definitively determined whether the sentence is true or false.
And yet the sentence, and yet Chat GPT is using the sentence in order to explain something, but they're surrounding that contradiction with other words in order to explain it. But it's still a created sentence that exists to one degree or the other. In the minds of people, there's a contradiction.
But you have to, again, you need more context for that sentence, because on its own, you're absolutely right, it creates a paradox. But if there's a sentence before that or a sentence after that, it eliminates that paradox. Communication.
And it goes to everything we're talking about in terms of trying to reliably translate or pass on information to you or to me.
This is a deep one from Steve. You can't explain language using words. There are a lot of things that you can't explain using words. I will agree with that. One is, okay, for instance, all right, this is an example of this. You're manning the microphones at SETI, and all of a sudden an alien race makes contact with you, and you answer, and they say, "Hi, how you doing?" You have a conversation. Quick, explain the difference between left and right.
Me right now?
Yeah, without using words. Would you be able to explain the difference? Well, you don't have to explain it to me,
Without
but
using words?
would no using just words? Would you be able to explain the concept of left or right to somebody using just words who had no idea what that meant?
I would have to fill up a lot of words to arrive at explaining left and right, because left and right is a situation where um, you're dividing you're dividing you're splitting two directions
Mm-hmm.
in a certain way. I'm thinking this right off the top of my head.
Right,
My concept of left is this side, and my concept of right is this side.
right.
In order for me to explain that to someone that has no idea what that is,
And you can only use words. You can't show them.
and
That's
you
the
can
hard
only
part.
use words. I'll say this about that.
Mm-hmm.
Another part of the discussion, I think it was with Noam Chomsky or something like that. He also said that definitions, because this reminds me exactly of that.
Mm-hmm.
Definitions for words in a book, in a dictionary,
Mm-hmm.
um, don't. There is no definition for language. Is such that definitions for
Mm-hmm.
the meaning of word are just suggestions.
Yeah, they change constantly.
So the suggestion of what this means in a dictionary, the word apple, it's
Mm-hmm.
just a suggestion to sort of roundabout get, and it could be anything, microphone,
Right.
it could be anything. They are just suggestions. But if you follow the logic through as what you're reading, and so if you go deep into it, you realize that everything is a hint at what at concepts.
Mm-hmm.
So language is trying to put concepts
Right.
into single consumable.
Right. That we both will understand and we can convey back and forth to one another.
Mhm.
And this is why conversing in text through messages, and the guys in the chat are facing it right now because they're trying to do it themselves. You know, Al is trying to kind of figure out how you would say left and right in just words. Whereas you and I, even if we shut our cameras off right now, we wouldn't be able to see each other, but we'd be able to hear each other. And there's inflection, there's tone. It's more apparent as to whether something is a question or an answer, or maybe a wait a minute, hold on just 1 second here. You know, there are nuances to tone of voice that are advantages over text. And they're being able to see one another because I can say this side of your body, and you'll get, oh, okay, this side, no, this side, reverse it. It's a camera, it reverses things. This side of your body, okay, and then you would understand. So it works slightly better. Steve wants to know, how does that description work with someone who is ambidextrous? It works slightly better than with somebody who is ambisinistrous, which means you kind of crap with both hands. You know.
You could also work it out by saying to someone, since Steve just said that, it made me
Mhm.
think. You could not use ambidextrous. You could just say to the person, the hand in which you pick up your fork, the hand in which you open the door, the hand in which you, any number of things. Now, this only works. So there's a certain percentage. The majority of people on Earth use the right hand, as opposed to left hand is not
Right.
as prolific.
Mhm.
So you would be right to a certain percent by explaining to a person in those terms.
Okay.
But it would not work for all the left-handed people.
You would explain what a dominant hand is.
No, you'd
But
explain what left is
no,
and
no,
right.
you would explain what a dominant hand is. The hand you use to hold the fork and the hand you use to open the doorknob. That's
You're
your
not,
dominant hand because if you're left-handed, you're gonna hold your fork in your left hand. You're gonna reach for the doorknob with your left hand.
dude. You see, this is another example.
Ex- ex-
I just,
exactly.
I just laid out
Mm-hmm.
in perfect English to me,
Mm-hmm.
without any variation on the theme, as best possible, so that the road would lead you to what I'm saying, and yet you you picked up certain key words. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
blaming you. I'm saying this is part
Yeah.
of the language thing that
Exactly.
took you in the direction that you went. But here's the thing. Let me reiterate.
Mm-hmm.
For the majority of people on Earth,
Mm-hmm.
you would be right, whatever percent that is, in
Mm-hmm.
trying to explain to a person what left and right is by saying to them that
Mm-hmm.
your hand that picks up forks, that opens doors, that pulls up the sock, that you reach for things,
Mm-hmm.
is your right hand, is your right side, and the one that you don't use as much is your left. You could use that in order
Mm-hmm.
to arrive at
Okay.
explanation without using physical signals, just verbally, and you would be right whatever percent of that of the population.
You, you might get. I don't know that they would. I'm trying to put myself in that position.
Dude, there's no way around this. I gave you such
Yeah,
a
I understand
clear.
that, but I'm trying to process in my head if I would understand that is the difference between right and left, if that's what right and left is. And
I just solved it for whatever
well,
percent of the public, dude. But dude, listen, for whatever percent of the public, right hand is dominant. See,
mhm,
if I were to have to explain a person that can't see me or whatever, and they don't know the concept, for let's say 60% of the public or whatever the percent might be, I'm going to fail with that 40% or whatever because they're left-handed. But for the right-handed people, they if I tell you right now, and let's say
mhm,
you can't see me and you don't
mhm,
know the concept, if I tell you, Mark, pick up the pencil, it's true that you could grab the pencil with
with
your
either
left
hand.
hand. But
Yeah.
if I tell you, Mark, what is the hand you hold your fork with and do the most activity with,
Mhm.
raise your hand, which one would it be?
Yeah, it'd be my right hand.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, and then if I attached the idea of right hand to it, you
Okay.
would now know automatically that that refers to right
And
hand.
you're fine with a human being, but again, you're working with SETI and you're on the microphone talking to an alien. We don't even know how many hands they got.
Did you just pull that out of the? I thought you were talking
No,
about
that was what I
communication
that's what I opened up with. What I was getting at was the
with human beings.
difficulty. Okay, and we transitioned into that. But uh,
Really?
but
Okay, I didn't know.
it's
Go ahead.
the ability to communicate is exactly what you're saying, and it's not always that easy because
Wait a
there is
second.
nuance. Now with people who know that we both have two hands, yes, you could explain right to left that way.
You can't explain a computer doesn't have hands.
Huh?
You just said that we're talking about some sort of computer or
No,
some
no,
sort
no,
of.
no, 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 no. I said we started this whole thing out.
Why is this difficult? What I gave you was if you pick up a fork, a hammer, or this or that, the preponderance of whatever the population would say, "Oh, so that's right," and that's it. Problem solved for whatever percent of that. But if you're talking about a computer that doesn't, they
I'm
don't have
not talking about
hands.
a computer. A computer never entered into this. I was talking about SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. You're there at SETI and you're communicating with some alien. Would you be able to explain the concept of left and right to that alien? That's what started this
Oh,
whole thing.
so it was an alien.
Yes.
Because I'm picturing. Okay, because my. Okay, so we don't know if an alien has hands. We don't know anything to that
Right.
effect.
They
So
may have one right in the middle. They might tip their hat and expose themselves. We don't know anything about them. We don't know what they look like. They don't know what we look like.
okay, fair
Would
enough.
you be able to convey the concept of right and left to somebody who had no idea what the hell we were
Mark,
talking
you might as
about?
well be talking to you. See, okay,
Yeah,
this works way better. This works way better if you're talking about a human that can't see you and you can't see them. But
exactly.
in your scenario, you might as well be talking to a porpoise
Hmm. Yeah,
because
exactly.
a porpoise won't talk back to you. So yes, there will be life forms that you can't explain, let alone left and right. I mean,
Yes.
I thought
That
we were somewhere else. I missed that part of it, but yeah, okay.
and that's what I was trying to get across, and somehow sometimes words just aren't enough. You need
Damn,
more.
Mark.
There's got to be visual there. And Jim, here's another one. If you're facing west, the side of you on the north side is the right side. Okay, quick. Where's west? If you're on Earth, you know where that is. If you're on alpha hydroxy 12, which way's west? You know,
There is
which
no
which
there is no west in terms of
the
everything.
galaxy. Yeah.
Well, even on Earth, there is a west, but at the same time, it's not a west. Because west depends on your. So actually, it depends on the sun setting. But there's also coordinates with north and.
Sure.
So there's a way to work it out with all the information given,
Sure.
but in a way where it's round. Oh no, I'm sorry. In,
It's an oblate spheroid.
no, actually, I wasn't even gonna.
Oh, the
I wasn't.
hubcap theory.
I wasn't even gonna offer you that. But whatever. These are concepts that are suggestions that give us a broad idea.
Mhm.
But the idea that sentence or words
Mhm.
definitions are a suggestion
Uh-huh.
when you read it in a book.
Mhm.
I like that because it makes sense to me. But we
And
operate on the level of, this is an ice cream cone. We kind of get that. But these are all abstract. Words are ways to make sense of things. But
mhm.
in reality, everything is because you could say a snow cone is made out of ice. It's not a snow cone. It's just ice.
Right.
And that
It's
thing is
not made of
hard.
snow. Yes.
Yeah. So you could go into this endless
Yeah. And because definitions always change. They always change. Jim Dockrell, way back up here, had an excellent point up here. The word awful and awesome used to mean the same thing. Absolutely right. Awful was full of awe, and awesome is filled with or capable of creating a sense of awe. So, yeah, they meant more or less the same thing. Just like the word fantastic used to mean of a fantasy. It was
fantastical.
nonsense. It was a dream, not real.
Well, fantastic still means fantastical.
Yeah, but it also means great, excellent, terrific.
That's what
So
that's
it's added a different meaning. It's added
another
more
layer.
meanings to it. Exactly.
But it's sort of okay. So let's do fantastic for half a second.
Hmm.
Anytime someone says, and this has been true for me since, but this is one example. There's other examples where I can't make the connection, but
Hmm.
that's one example. When somebody says, "Oh, that's fantastic," I've always known that the derivative of that,
Hmm.
or at least I've accepted it as such, that it derives from the fantastical, the basically,
Of a fantasy.
the fantasy,
Hmm.
which the suggestion is that wow, that's so incredible, that's so amazing because it's a fantasy. It's something.
Hmm.
It's kind of on par when
Yeah.
somebody says, "Oh, but that's not everybody says this, but there are key places in Spanish.
Hmm.
It's said a lot in Spanish. They say, well, that's just divine."
Right.
Well, that's not divine, but they're
Right.
using it because it's something so
Right.
so it's like flowery,
Yes, it's an additional layer to that word. It's a secondary meaning.
right.
It doesn't necessarily mean godly, or angelic or something like that, but
Right.
it means it's great. I mean, that candy that's called divinity. No, not the holy divinity, but it's just a candy that's called divinity or
Or Mark,
confection.
how about this? This is a good example. It popped in my head when they suggest, like in the commercials, they say
Mhm.
silky milk chocolate,
Yeah.
silky,
Yeah.
and yet, it's such a bullcrap embellishment so they could sell
Mhm.
their product. I mean, think about it. So it's bull crap. Silky. But you know exactly what they mean when they say
You
it,
do.
because here's the trick with all this, in my opinion. Silky doesn't work at all, zero, and yet it makes perfect sense because
Mhm.
I'm translating it in my mind, and silky is something
Mhm.
so, like, when I think of silk, I'm like, oh, it's so soft, it's so nice, it's so pleasant.
Slippery and smooth and light and clingy and filmingly and just feels good.
Yeah,
Mhm.
isn't it amazing though, Mark? I mean,
It
because
it is,
you
but I'll
can't
take it one step further because if you examine what silk really is, at the end of the
caterpillar
day,
shit crap.
not quite. It's dried caterpillar spit. That's what silk is.
So why don't they just say that?
Because it
Delicious chocolate
caterpillar
caterpillar spit.
spit. And you know what? There are some people who would buy it. And caterpillar spit would be a good name for a glue or something. Here, Hokey's
So
caterpillar spit, best glue in town.
so
Little,
this
little, yeah.
this foray, see this foray into the thing. See the but see that's where the it's a miracle, even though we're using the same language with all these obstacles in the way, that we can even move forward in a discussion or in life, because there are stumbling blocks. At least this evening, I'll just say this before well, actually say the Linda thing.
Oh, yeah, yeah. She says she's spinning some silk right now. Yeah, and you know, it's
So one takeaway for me this evening,
Mhm.
because we were working it out and stuff, and obviously it's a work in progress. It's never done, but
No.
we're doing back and forths, and
Mhm.
every time we have a back and forth, we don't need to agree.
No.
Um, in order for it to be effective and functional, for one to take home with them and ponder about. But one takeaway from all this between you and I, and everyone there out here in the chat, um, is for me, is that, and I mentioned it out loud, but I'm working it out as I go, is that when we're communicating with our best intentions,
Mhm.
is it's not many times, not most of the time, many times it's not good enough.
No.
Um, the signals that one sends, because the receiving end at the level of language is pasting together the code that you're offering. And if a concept is too involved, a person can say, well, wait a second, how about this door number 3 or 4 that I didn't intend to go down,
Right.
but now a door has been opened.
Right.
And then when you return it back to me, you've opened a door on the side. And I'm saying, whoa, that door. No, I don't, not that door, Mark, this door over here. And
Right.
then I say that, and you're saying, well, wait a second, what you just gave me opens up this door. And I'm
Right.
saying, well, not that door, Mark. I'm going. And so we're creating paths with language, carving out trails
Mhm.
that in reality do have many
Oh
branches.
yeah. Oh yeah. A river is not just a river. Look at all of the tributaries. It's not finished until it gets down to its mouth and empties into the sea. Then it's complete. But all along the way, whether it be another river that joins it, or a little creek or a stream, or even some guy hosing off his driveway and it runs down the gutter and trickles into the river's not complete until it ends.
Mhm.
So language is more or less the same thing. And it's evolving. It's going to continue to evolve. And who knows what it's going to be like 1,000 years from now? What we're speaking as English may be completely gone and replaced with something else. I mean, William Shakespeare did not write in the language we speak today. if you try to read anything original by him, and you can make it through his handwriting, number one, but if you try to read anything from him or his peers at of the day, they were writing in an evolving form of Old English, which had a lot of different words, a lot of different pronunciations, and we wouldn't understand one another. You know, so, but he was speaking English, and we're speaking English, but it's a different English.
and,
So,
and if and luckily, a lot of it can be
mhm,
moved forward so that we understand it. Because if it gets to the point where it's so convoluted, it's a
mhm.
miracle. See,
It is.
I just did it. Well, no, but see what I just did?
Mm,
It's a miracle. It's a
mhm,
miracle. What I was about to say is it's a miracle. Notice the flowery word, um, because it is. But you understand that you receive it as such. But it might not be so in another situation. It's a miracle that we have the hieroglyphics translated due to the
the
whatchamacallit.
Rosetta Stone, yeah, the Rosetta Stone, yeah,
Because without that, we'd just be looking at stickmen and whatnot.
yeah. That's all we thought it was. You know, yeah. Well, I say we. That's all they thought it was. They had no idea what it was. They thought it was art, and it turns out what it is. It's a receipt for an order. It's a proclamation slash receipt for an order
In different
in different languages that were it had to be posted in those different languages so that people's from the trading center, all those peoples could read it.
I'm gonna throw a third thing, although this
Hmm.
diverts from the topic. Just this month,
Hmm.
they did DNA analysis on, I believe it's Beethoven.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they took
Did
a
they
lot
did they do the analysis or they get the results back?
and they got the results back.
Oh, both. Okay, cool.
And they've plotted his people, because before I say
Hmm.
all this DNA stuff, due to the Human Genome Project,
Hmm.
they've it's public. So there's no all these people, all these different teams across the world that work independently. They'll
Uh-huh.
have little labs everywhere and stuff. There's one lab. He's an American guy. Um, his name is David Reich, and my goodness, this guy is like like, and people rush to get these bones and work on. They're supposed to publish it publicly, so you and I can grab the data,
Hmm.
and they offer programs for free. They're so complicated that's why all these companies emerge. But what
Yeah.
they do is they publish them. Since the Genome Project, they
Hmm.
publish all the data on the sequencing of everything they find,
Hmm.
so that any scientist or layman
Hmm.
around the world, because this is the patrimony of the world.
Right.
So you and I, like if we were invested in it and we said, I really want to delve into this, you could download the software, you could sit there, you'd have to do all the study and this and that, but it computes out and stuff, and it puts people Northwest, Europe. Does it put it in China? And you have all these breakdowns and stuff, and they can configure so they can work out what is the ancestry and this and that, and all sorts of things. Genetic variation. It's amazing,
Yeah.
but it's all public.
Uh-huh.
So they've taken Beethoven's stuff now and they've published it so people can do cross. I'm not related to him
Hmm.
um, at all, because
Okay.
I have a program, and I looked. I said, "Oh, that'll be freaking cool."
Hmm.
Nope, nah. So it turns out like there's more you could read. You guys could read about it, but it turns out that he's not a Beethoven.
Hmm. He's not.
No, because the Beethovens that are
Hmm.
descended, they don't match. They match with they match with another line. So there's actual descendants now that are from another line,
Hmm.
and they're like, "Holy crap!"
We're not related to Ludwig van.
Right? They thought they were, and now the ones that weren't
Hmm.
and had no clue are saying, "Holy crap! I'm related to him." Yeah. So you could look it up in the details and stuff, but I found it so trippy, and actually, I was hoping to get in on that one, and so I went and looked, and it said nope, my stuff doesn't match him.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay. I've got just let's put this on pause for just a second because we confused Al. Pardon the question, but what is the topic? There's a common thread in all of this. Your duty, Al, is to try to figure out what the common topic is. And no, it is not to give people a headache. If I had to put a title on this episode, I've got it in my head right now. But I'll let you figure it out. And no, we're not going to be talking about lizards and zombies. The DNA analysis, I love the idea because, okay, if there's any one thing that you should know about me, Eloy, by now, is that I don't like pretentiousness. I think pretentious people need to have a shot of bourbon and a cheeseburger and just mellow out,
yeah.
you know? So I love the idea of all of these people
Getting
who
shot
had
down.
their nose in the air about, well, I'm a descendant of Beethoven, to have a lab go, survey says, no, you're not. You're just another mope like me, hoping like heck you get 50,000 miles out of a set of tires. You know.
Oh, they also did another one. This month has been crazy with that. They did another one. They had, what are those people? It's an African tribe, the Zulu.
Okay.
They did a full spectrum analysis on these people, and they published it. And again, it's like the samples are free to, like, you know, all that free for people. So people grab it after the study comes out,
Uh-huh.
and then they start, you know, independent. All the labs start doing all sorts of stuff and to check.
Sure.
So it itself, I think it's a very cool thing. But anyways, they did I think it's the Zulu.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the Zulu. It's on the somewhere on the west coast of Africa. And tradition had it that these
Mm-hmm.
people were a blend of people like Arab people,
Mm-hmm.
plus, you know, so the Arabs came amongst them. But it was a suggestion written in history,
Mm-hmm.
in, you know, very old history, and they discovered that yes, indeed, men from the Arabian Peninsula came in. So
Yep.
these African people have significant Arabian, you
DNA
know,
markers.
paternal, yeah, in them. And so the consequence of that is that it verifies historical notions
Mm-hmm.
that were written down, or not written down, but verbalized, or maybe in some cases written down. I didn't delve into it, but I
Yeah.
read the synopsis of it, and it
I
was like, wow.
I don't know how you consume as much of this as you do, simply because I would go cross-eyed trying to keep up with it. Because when you say delve into it, that
Yeah.
tells me you've already read 100 pages and you know there's 1,000 more. And
Oh
it's
no,
just like, dude, I'd be screaming, let me out.
no, dude, the people that do this
Oh, I know.
are just extreme. The consumption and study and just, these people are so extreme. I it's I'm just happy to get a synopsis of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there's people that go into the nuance of it to such a
Mm-hmm.
degree.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing, dude. But
I've read
go
I've
ahead,
read
go ahead.
scientific papers before. And what I generally do is I'll read the first couple of paragraphs. Then I jump straight down to the conclusions because I'm not going to go through the methodology. I'm not doing that. I'm going to go straight down to the conclusions. And then if something sparks my interest there, I'll go back up and go up to see what was going on with that. But I don't have time to read through a telephone book of information to get the conclusions of this study. I know what it was about. I know what it's for. I know what they're trying to prove or disprove. Let's get to the conclusions. You know, and then to say it's dry reading in a lot of cases is the understatement of the century. It really is.
It is. So what's helped me in all this is
Mm-hmm.
because I'm focused on this genealogy side, but I've learned about geographic locations.
Hmm.
Not only in Spain, but I've learned about Eastern Europe,
Hmm.
the British Isles more. Like my idea of the British Isles was the British Isles and some basic tenets of the history, certain things, but it's a generalized overview, and then of course you have key kings and stuff, but in a general sense, blurry at best. It's still all blurry because you're talking about thousands and thousands of years of history. So the only other way is to have a map on your or a poster
Hmm.
with a timeline. I've
Yeah.
thought of that, so you can always eye it and see in 1166 or over here. So with a timeline, you can always visualize and then go back to your. But due to all that plus the genetic stuff, you sort of say, oh, and it helps you like overlap, like with
Hmm.
a sheet of transparency
Yeah.
paper. Um, so it helps you overlap, and then it allows you to sort of guide you. And so that's helped me a lot,
Yeah.
the two things, but it's still a basic
Well, I
understanding.
yeah, but and that's the thing. You say it's still a basic understanding,
Yeah, and
but
terrible.
the amount that you consume is still. I mean, I couldn't do it. So I tip the fedora to you. There's no way I could do it. Then again,
Yeah,
you're researching into something that you love, that's
that
something
I'm
that you're
interested.
interested in, that you're
Yeah,
passionate about. So I can see where it wouldn't seem like work to you.
no, it's enjoyable.
I can genuinely see that. So, hey, hats off to you. I used to be that hot into it, but I had to get out of it. And now I never got into the DNA side because I was looking for documentation, and it was the hunt
Yeah,
that was exciting for me, and trying to track these people, because believe me, in the last 10 years, more information has been released in the last 10 years than was released in the previous 20 or 30. So,
well, none of this was really available until the 2000s.
well, I mean, yeah. And you look at just the census, they had to find them, then they had to digitize them, and they're still not complete. I mean, there are very few complete years for the US Census, and they're still working on it, and new stuff it gets released every day. But the volumes, I mean, the mountain of information this country has developed over the last 200 and however many years, is just mind-boggling. And
There's a lot.
are there physically enough people to digitize this information and get it put online?
They said the 1950s that just came out is completely done.
Yeah, and I believe that it is. But and I didn't mean to say that not every that no census is complete. I meant to say that there are a lot of censuses that are incomplete.
Missing
Im-
documents.
Missing documents. Certain townships, the records were lost or misplaced or damaged or beyond recognition or things like that. I mean, all this information is fleeting. Every format is fleeting. Even paper, we say, oh, well, we've got to put it on paper. Well, even that is fleeting because paper only lasts so long. And as it breaks down, it turns to an acid, which makes it break down even more faster. So, there's no perfect medium. Even stone will eventually erode. All we can do is try to collate and put it in as many places as possible, increasing the likelihood that somebody will be able to find it when they go to look for it.
It's amazing we have what we do have.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I mean, it's amazing we have what I mean. How many papers have you lost at your home? Maybe they weren't important, but like stuff that maybe, well, it depends on how
Oh,
of a hoarder you are. But how many things have you hoarded that, like for instance, I have documents that I hoarded outside in a closet outside,
mhm.
and I come to realize that they were chewed up by bugs,
Yeah,
and they weren't that important necessarily. That I was like, oh crap. But at the same time, like, wow,
yeah.
even inside a little locked thing,
Hmm.
creatures get at it. So
Oh
imagine
yeah.
thousands of years.
Oh yeah. And that's just in your home. Imagine the quote unquote bookworms the bugs that you're talking about get into the Library of Congress. What would they destroy? You know, we thought we had figured it out with microfiche. Well, it turns out that that film deteriorates and degrades and falls apart. Celluloid film degrades and falls apart. I mean, there are people whose job it is right now. They're attempting to save and preserve every foot of video film that was ever made. And too much of it, I mean, for every hour they manage to salvage, there are 2 to 3, 4 hours that is just lost. It's gone. It's deteriorated.
Even that, yeah.
And if you look at it, it just crumbles. There's no way to salvage what's on it.
Yeah, it's
so, you know, a lot of our history is just going away.
There's a few. Let's run through some of these questions because I have some answers we might both have.
I'm driving Al up a tree with the topic. The topic, if I were going to name this episode, Al, I would call it From Out in Left Field. That's the only thing that binds them. That's the only common thread that binds them.
One ring to bind them all.
Yeah, From Out of Left Field. Both, we don't know where the topic is going to go, but we also talked about directions. So, okay, what questions did you see out here? You can click on them and bring them up too.
Oh, okay. I just, for some reason, unspoken. That's always been your.
Go for it.
Well, no, yeah, but when you do it, it's kind of like I'm on the co-pilot seat when on certain things. Like we all take roles. Mm-hmm. What do you mean? No, you know that's true. Like there's some roles. If I were to spring on you something that I do during the show, and now you're doing, you're like for a moment, you're like, wait a second, what? Yeah. So and so what you just did is so let's see, followed by zombies. Well, wait, let's start. I'm sorry, Snow Crusher. Let's start with.
Yeah, Al was asking about the topic.
I don't even know where. Let's see. I'm not Portuguese. See, I can't reference that now. Snow Crusher followed by zombie. See, I don't know what's going on.
Well, it started up above where with Al was talking about what is the topic.
Okay, so and here Al says it turns out to be a descendant of Genghis Khan. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people that you've read those articles because you're mentioning that and stuff. But in truth, if you go if you go the further back you go, we're all related to even more of those smaller and smaller groups. So one that's shocking, and I'm gonna lay it out, screw it, but you could do the thing. So this one's shocking. Not to me, like I'm over it already. Like I know the trajectory, like it's done. But we're all related for the most part. To the level of these other things, like what's this guy's name that you always mention, Mark, in Europe? From what
Charlemagne,
and the Genghis Khan one, and this and that. Well, many of us across the board, not considering just Southern Europe or the places where the Arabs went. No, all across the board are related to Muhammad. Okay. Believe it or not.
Okay.
Not all of us. Because there's trajectories, but you may have people that were related to Muhammad that are related to you down the pike or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's how incredibly small of a population we come from. It's extreme.
Okay, I got that figured out. This was when you were talking about Beethoven, when they did the DNA analysis of Beethoven.
Gotcha.
And got the results. Al says, turns out he was a descendant of Genghis Khan. Okay.
Now
you know what? He might be. And where Greg came in with the Al was asking what the topics were, and Greg came in and said lizards next. And no, not lizards. And then followed by zombies. Now, we could do the zombie lizards of Madagascar, but that would be too easy.
The other day, unbeknownst, because I never did it, but I was going to begin doing a poster. It was some sort of, I never followed through, and I should keep it in, but screw it. and just lay it out there for Greg. I was gonna do a set of posters, all themed of zombie and vampire and such, but naming them, the Manitoba zombies of this, and making it old school posters, like
Mhm.
some quick art, just for the fun of it, and posting them to see what he said. But then I said, oh crap, this I had some other squirrel, stuff. I had
this,
the
this
intention, but I didn't do it.
this vampire zombie on a gold wing
And he feeds,
in front of the 7-Eleven with a Slurpee in his hand.
yeah, a poster that's ridiculous like that, like a parody type thing. But he feeds that monster because he keeps throwing, chucking wood in the fire on that. What else do we have?
Well, Jim Dockrell says Genghis Khan's DNA is present in about 16 million men alive today. I thought it was a little bit more than that, Jim. I saw one study, but then again, the study I saw was really old, and it said that in the western half of China, it's estimated that 8% of the males are direct descendants from Genghis Khan. He had like 500 wives. So, but then again, back then, wife was kind of a dubious honor, It
Yeah,
was kind of a, you're mine now. Oh, does that they didn't go through a ceremony? It's just now that she's his wife.
well, one of the cool, interesting things is that, um, for the most part, like in Mark's case, it's not true. So, like Western Europe, Europe
Mhm.
as a whole, but let's say Western Europe shares basically the same few sets of parents
Uh-huh.
on the paternal side.
Yeah.
So all the men, because what they did was that they came in and they procreated wild, like, um, with the women, and so the women do have variations. This is a
Mhm.
general sense, but the men
Yeah.
originate from very small. So, as an example, one of the reasons I get a lot of connections with British people and this and that, to one degree,
Uh-huh.
there's other scenarios within this that with British people and people from the north as well. I may have ancestors directly back a few generations further than I know
Mhm.
that were from those places, but my male line, my father, grandfather, is the same line that was in that produced the British people. It's the same line that produced the German people.
Mhm.
Now there are a few other haplogroups
Mhm.
in that variation, but all these people came from the same damn thing. It's just that we're talking about the extension of history going
Yeah.
forward and people procreating and procreating. So you have
Yeah.
your different little enclaves of countries and such and this and
Right.
that. But we're
People
all,
settled in this valley, and other people settled in that valley, and
yeah. So
yeah.
the Genghis Khan thing, it's not it's not something readily, like, if I was told this prior to me delving into the thing, I'd say Genghis Khan,
Mhm.
Genghis Khan. But yeah, it's like yeah, okay, Genghis Khan, because as we go back, it's a smaller little group of people. So yeah, it's not surprising. I'm just like, what was surprising to me?
Mhm.
I'll just say, what was surprising was the two I posted this like a few months ago, the Pharaoh.
Mhm.
And this one, I love this. The Pharaoh is a European haplogroup,
Yeah.
direct European line.
Yeah.
Two in common.
Mhm.
Don't toot your horn just yet, because
Yep.
he's direct European male lineage. But there's people that are like totally not on board with that. But it just
Yeah.
happens to
Well.
be the darn on the other side, as a contradiction, Hitler.
Mhm.
And by the way, the Hitler thing is not solid, but there are other European male. His haplogroup, direct parent line, Africa.
Yep.
No crap,
Yep.
Africa.
Yep.
But there's other examples to that is a common thing.
Mhm.
It's found in Europe and this and that. But there's all these weird things,
Yep.
that
All kinds of all kinds of things that you wouldn't. wouldn't expect.
So I posted a last thing. I posted a poster of the pharaoh just a few months ago with raging blue eyes, just standing there like this, like that. Just because it's so counterintuitive of what we see in movies, but it's so. I love the juxtaposing that ruins, prior, notions and stuff. So yeah.
Well, we were talking about Genghis Khan. And how, what did you find, Jim? Jim said he found that Genghis Khan, what percent of the world is related to Genghis Khan? 0.5%. Okay. Now let's say, and that's the world population. So 8 billion people. 0.5% of 8 billion is still a crap ton of people. Let's not forget that Genghis Khan died in 1227. So it's not like this was thousands and thousands of years ago. This was not even 1,000 years ago. So let me do the real quick math here.
Well, yeah.
We're looking at 796 years ago. So a little bit less than 800 years ago is when he died. And 0.5% of the world's population is a descendant of his.
Well, remember, we're all we're all like, I think it's 25th or 30th cousins. Like, so Mark and I, at some point if we were to be able to, and by the way, it's at this point it's impossible to do because there just wasn't documentation. But
right,
if we were to be able to go past that threshold, because most European, no, just across the board, except for the Chinese, and maybe some other groups, but in Europe, once you cross the threshold of the 1500s, if you're lucky, 1500s, but once you cross the 1500s, good luck to that.
Yeah.
You may get some examples, but they're iffy at best.
Yeah.
You're working on assumptions. But if we were to be able to trace at some point, who knows how far back, multiple ancestors on my tree would be on his tree and vice versa. They would be the same people. Because the tree just blows up with population.
At some point, and I don't remember what it's called. You might remember the name.
Pedigree collapse.
Yeah, because at some point you get back to where you have had more ancestors than there have ever been people who were alive on Earth.
Yeah.
So, and that is physically impossible. That cannot happen. So we all have to share some.
Yeah, because in Mark's tree and in my tree, so like let's say Mark has, boy, I don't know at what generation it turns into, like let's say 100,000 or something, like roughly, let's say, but there's an actual math for it. But like in Mark's tree, at some point he's going to have direct ancestors at numbers like, let's say 100,000 as an example. But in my tree, at some point, I'm going to have the same amount. But if you multiply that same 100,000 at that some point, maybe let's say 1,000 years ago or 1,500 years ago, whatever the case might be, if you multiply that 100,000 by every person alive today that should have 100,000 people at the same time, that would create a world population so bloated that it wouldn't be realistic. And so that's why they say that there's no way that it has to arc into smaller groups going back in time where everybody else is connected to everybody else at some point in time, so that's why we find in many cases, like me and JP or JP and I, we're related in little segments of DNA. Who knows back when it pops up. And I've tried it with other British people where it doesn't show. So that means that at some point, maybe 20 generations back, 10, maybe less, there's an ancestor somewhere back there that would share in common. It can't be known because it's probably,
there were no documentation back there. Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
It's mind blowing, dude.
Yeah, it is. It is. But you also get to the point to where the numbers don't matter anymore. There,
Oh yeah.
there, and I still don't know what that point is. But there becomes a point, and it doesn't matter if you're talking about people or what you're talking about, where numbers are meaningless. They're so big there's no concept.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like when you think of, well, let's just put it into something that we've all can relate to, M&Ms. When you think of how many million bags of M&Ms come out of the
Conveyor.
factory every day, come off of that conveyor every day. Now think of how many M&Ms are in each one of those bags. Now think of how many M&Ms do they make in a day. The number can't be counted, not by people.
And a lot of these people back then, which I know we've talked about, but a lot of these people suffered through not one but multiple plague situations. So
Plagues, wars.
it
Yeah.
reduced it reduced the local populations to a smidgen of people where they had to get on with it. And what did
Yeah.
they do? They did it with each with each other.
Well,
But like places like the places where my ancestors are from on my paternal side, but not just, but let's say were hit with the plague so bad, some villages had maybe a couple dozen people left in them. And it
mhm,
was those couple of dozen people from town to town that repopulated those places.
mhm,
So in a sense, it's freaking weird, but in a sense, any person that can trace their people to the locations that I can in my specific ancestral area, at one point or another, they're all related. So that's why you say, oh, the British Isles and this and that. Yeah, you might have a distance from one person to the other, but in a sense,
mhm.
they're all related.
Yeah.
All the British, in a sense. In fact, there was a thing that just came out where it was a Scottish lady, and she studies these things, and so she's explaining about the Vikings, and she's saying, well, I've come to the conclusion that I'll find it and post it. She says, I've come to the conclusion, because the evidence points towards it, that I think she said Norwegian. She says, I'm a great deal of my DNA is Norwegian, but I'm Scottish, and I'm fully Scottish. It just happens that history happened and this and that.
Yeah.
So, um, and she explained that a lot of people are trying to come to terms with what the data is showing, because a lot of people had a sense that this is their iconic origin, but that's not the case. The case is that it's freaking. This is controversial, but screw it, because it's true as far as the evidence points. All of us come from prior to where we came from at some point. It's funny because it's the Caucasus, that region where the east meets the west,
Mhm.
that region mountainous, and that area close to the Danube River, just that whole
Yeah.
area. Those were the people that expanded to the rest of Europe and
Yeah.
towards the west and towards the south and stuff.
Yeah.
So at one point we go back to that place, which is mind blowing.
Yeah. No,
It's mind blowing.
well, I mean, it's just the advancement of people, of where they migrated to, But even those people came from somewhere. So,
Well, they went back. They went back to that one place prior, and then
Mhm.
from that one place prior, they went back to,
Yeah.
according to everything, Africa.
Yeah.
It just, that's the thing,
Mhm.
which is kind of, the whole concept is insane.
Well,
But we're
but
talking,
we're also talking about hundreds of thousands of years too. So,
yeah,
so
it's still a mind blowing. All of it is mind blowing.
we were talking about plagues and epidemics and pandemics and things like that. The Black Death, the Black Plague, was from 1346 to 1353, and depending upon who you listen to, this is all of Europe, Asia, and North Africa, anywhere from 75 million to 200 million deaths as a result of that. I've heard anywhere from 25 to 40% of Europe just died and then came back from that.
There's the two oldest plague victims found, bones and tested.
Mm-hmm.
One is from Russia,
Mm-hmm.
or what is Russia today, and one is from the Basque Country.
Yeah. Looking here, it is. It started in 1346. The big European plague um, started in Azov, which is back there in that region.
So the two victims, that one, the Russian one,
Hmm.
roughly, or what
Yeah.
is like the Russian thing, and the Basque one,
Hmm.
they did a study and they can't quite figure a situation.
Hmm.
The Basque is an earlier plague victim
Um,
by I don't know how many, and
yeah.
so there's two theories. One, which I don't think is true, but they said it could have started in actually in the Basque country and spread, and the other one is it started back east. They have
Well,
conflicting data on it.
now let's. There's we got to remember there were mountain ranges in between and what have you, and back over here on Azov, where the earliest in 1346, that's the earliest outbreaks. It traveled from there. It spread south and a little bit east, but it didn't get into what we would now call Russia proper. Okay. It didn't hit Russia proper until the 1850s. So it would make sense that the one from the 1850s hit later. Excuse me, it would make sense that the one from the Basque region that got hit in 1848 and 1849 was older than the ones from Russia. So that would make sense.
They
You.
still have two conflicting issues.
Mhm,
One, because of so it's a complicated thing, but the original thought was
mhm,
that it came from the east,
mhm,
maybe like east, like China through trade routes.
mhm,
These ships arrived in ports across Europe.
mhm.
Santander was one of them.
Yeah.
In fact, that blew up from Santander going down. That's one
Mhm,
suggestion, at least for that region of the Iberian Peninsula,
yeah.
but other ports across Western Europe, and it spread through there. But it conflicts. Um, there's conflicting data. There's papers on it
Yeah.
where they post the two things. We have this Russian one, but
Mhm,
the Basque one is an earlier guy with the
mhm.
plague. But there were instances of the plague throughout
Right.
history.
Right. And
So
he may have been a Russian who was part of a seaman, a sailor.
no, he was a Basque sample,
No, I
and
mean
then there was a Russian sample.
that's what I mean. The Russian guy may have been one of these people involved in trade. He may have been a sailor because you'd have to see this map that I'm looking at. It comes from an area that is within what is now Russia, but wasn't back then. Um, and it goes down into the Mediterranean and spreads to some of the islands in the second wave. It hit Constantinople, it hit Sicily, it all of that in 1347.
Did it come from China?
No, no, it moved into China in 1849.
1849 what?
Excuse me,
BC?
1349. I'm sorry, I didn't mean 1349. But yeah,
They
it didn't get up into what is like, for instance, it didn't hit Moscow until 1352. So
and it came from where?
it started in a place called Azov.
Which is today's what?
It's now in Russia, but it
Gotcha.
wasn't at the time.
In theory,
Mhm,
the they've scraped the they found disease
mhm,
of the plague bubonic
mhm,
in the very first settlers that came across and set like the males that dominated Europe
mhm.
at the congealment of what is today's European mixture, let's say.
Yeah,
They've already found disease that they brought in, so some people suggest that that was very early on. So we're talking about a long time. This is prior
yeah,
to even any concepts of things that we think of. um, and some suggest that they it killed off the population and they were able to thrive. There's a lot of stuff that's still being
right.
worked out, but the plague eviscerated
Yeah,
population.
it did. It absolutely did. It absolutely did. So, okay, here you go. Um, okay, the reason I'd have to show you this map, so it wouldn't make any sense
You
if
could
I
show it
tried
if
to.
you want.
Okay, well, I can do that, I guess. Um, entire screen. Boom and boom. And here is the map. Okay, this is the area that I'm talking about. Azov, this area. This is now part of Russia, but it wasn't at the time. This was controlled by the Mongol hordes. Okay. At this time, Genghis Khan was dead. They were called the Golden Horde. You see that line right there?
Yeah.
This was controlled by the Golden Horde. Christians were not allowed to go in. That was
What
just
are
a line.
what are
Okay.
what are the what's
This is the origin area here in 1346.
well, let me ask you, what are all the light green even going on?
That's where I'm going with that. The light green is the next wave in 1347. So it spread out here and then came down into Constantinople with the traders, the ships and merchants and what have you,
Yeah.
spread down into the Mediterranean in 1347 and even got into France and down into some of the islands off of Spain. Okay. 1348, it spread to northern Italy, into northern Africa, Morocco, and then into Italy, Greece, and then into Spain and northern Portugal. It also spread up into London, the southern United Kingdom, at about the same time. 1349 is this color here. That's when the rest of Spain started getting it infected, and the rest of England. It didn't hit Scotland until 1350. And it hit northern Europe in 1350 as well. This is northern Germany, and then we're up in here into the Netherlands. And this is all northern Germany up in here. 1351, it hit Krakow, Warsaw, Poland, and it didn't hit Russia until 1352. There's
Interesting.
there's Moscow, Smolensk, Kiev, and then here in 1353. But see, this is why this line here that separated the Golden Horde from the Christians, Eastern Orthodox, it was basically forbidden. There was no trade or travel. Nobody in, nobody out.
It spread from 46 to 53.
Right. Now, if you look at these solid arrows, these are maritime trade routes. And the arrowhead with the broken line, like this one here, that is land trade routes. And that's where it spread into the Middle East. That's Baghdad right there. And there is Jerusalem, Damascus, now Syria. There's Cairo down there. It started heading this way, 1349. That's the Silk Road off into China.
That's a very good map.
So this is where it started in 1346, and this is how it spread. Land trade routes and then maritime trade routes down into Constantinople, Turkey, and then down into the Med. So,
Very good.
but yeah, the end all and be all is, depending upon who you listen to, anywhere from a quarter to a half of Europe just ceased to exist. So,
It's a miracle that, that we it's it's just so it's mind blowing, dude. That
yeah,
map is a really good map. My
yeah.
goodness.
And that was in the 1300s. That was in the 1300s. So that was 100 years after the death of Genghis Khan. So you really don't have to go back all that far. That was 670 something years ago. You don't really have to go back that far to get to these events,
Right.
relatively speaking.
Yeah, you're right. It's not terribly. Wow, dude. That's a good map because it really, lays it out.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. I see. It makes sense what you were saying that it would have reached. But
Hmm.
that's if the samples, I don't remember if it was from an earlier incident or not. So I don't remember,
Hmm.
but I think that this matches.
Hmm. Yeah, that's because they said the Basque had it before the Russian, and it makes perfect sense because it didn't get to Russia until very, very late in the entire ordeal.
Dude, insane.
Hmm.
I know that I I know we're about to. Was that a signal that we're going to wrap
No,
it
it
up?
was the signal that I was about to cough, and I forgot to hit mute. I apologize.
No, I'll just say that I know that there was I think it was Justinian that caught the plague but
Mhm.
survived it.
Oh yeah, not everybody that got it died. Most folks did. It's just like not everybody that got smallpox died. Most folks did. But, you know,
Savage, dude.
oh yeah,
Savage.
absolutely. And the worst thing about it is we can sit here with the 20th century, 21st century view and look at things in hindsight and say, well, couldn't they figure this out? No. They
No,
thought they had it figured out. They thought they knew, but they were wrong.
they had no idea. I mean,
They had no technology like we have today, you know?
unbelievable.
Yeah.
All
So,
right, I think we're good. What do you
okay, you
say?
want to land the plane? Okay,
We'll
we
leave
can
it
do
on a
that.
high note.
All right. Yeah. This just into our newsroom. Half of Europe's gone. In other news, the price of Twinkies has dropped 10%.
There's an episode in this one's for Greg. There's an episode in the zombie thing, Walking Dead,
Mhm.
where they find a Twinkie truck. Or no, it wasn't Walking Dead. It was some sort of movie about zombies, and they find a Twinkie truck, and it's all Twinkies.
Mhm.
I mean, that's a gold mine in a situation like.
Sure.
In any event, we go live every Tuesday at 6:30 Eastern, 9:30 Pacific Coast time here on our YouTube channel, Trampled Underfoot Podcast on YouTube. We also have a page on Facebook, Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook. We post uh, images and videos and links and such concerning the topics that we talk about here and there. So go visit that. And we also have a website called trampledunderfootpodcast.com where you can catch our past episodes by pressing the Wayback Machine button over there. And we're also sponsored by
Steve Nealon at Harneal Media. You know him, you love him, you see him out in the chat. He's always there with us. I'm very proud to call him a friend. I'm here to tell you, folks, I'm serious. I'm serious in this. I'm serious when I say this now. The absolute best way to build or increase your web presence is with your own website. Steve Nealon can help you set up that website, help you run that website. And he not only will do that, he'll do it very, very well. I don't know how the guy sleeps because he is everywhere all at the same time. And I'm proud to call him a friend. Check him out at the link right here on the screen right now or down in the description of every episode of the Trampled Underfoot podcast. So, I forgot where I was going to go. That's Harneal Media anyway, Harneal Media, sponsor of trampleunderfootpodcast.com.
Without Further Ado, you were going to say, right?
Yeah, and I can't remember where I was going to go with that. Sorry.
Well,
Screwed that up.
I do want to thank you guys for coming out. I just felt, I told you at the beginning that I had slightly sore throat. I
Uh-huh.
just felt that getting knocked in the dirt for some reason. My body is just like it totally. I think it's allergies or something. But in any event,
Coffee
guys,
time.
Enjoy the rest of your week. Be happy. Do the things you love. We wish you the best, and we'll catch you here next time.
Have the week you deserve.
See
Peace.
ya. That was
There, get him in there. Get him in. There we go. Peace. Bunny ears.